I always thought that fear is something childish. That fear is the darkness under your bed, a stranger in an alley, or the crunch of a branch outside your window at night. But now I know that the real fear is the realization that you are dead, and still exist. My name is James Hadley. I'm 61 years old and I've been working in architecture all my life. He built towers, museums, and schools. I designed spaces where people would feel protected, inspired, and sometimes even happier. This was his pride, to create order, symmetry, and meaning. Although, to be honest, the meaning in my life was less and less every year. I had a wife, children, and grandchildren. But I was getting further away from them. I didn't know why. Too often I hid behind blueprints, concrete shapes, and perfect angles. Maybe because my inner house has long since begun to collapse. Only I didn't notice. The heart attack was sudden. I was walking down the street on my way home from a conference. It was a normal day, coffee, boring speeches, polite handshakes. Then the pain. But not sharp. It came as quietly as a draft. I felt my heart grow slower. Each blow was harder, as if something inside me was saying something, it's time. I don't remember falling. I just remember people leaning over me, someone calling for an ambulance, someone pressing on my chest. The sounds grew distant. Their faces are blurry. And then, silence. But not the void. Not the end. I opened my eyes, if they were eyes at all, and saw grayness. The world was washed to a solid ashen color. The air was thick, like the smoke of wet wood. No sky, no earth, only space that cannot be measured. Whether I was standing or hanging, I didn't know. I couldn't feel my body, but I could feel the presence. I existed. Light began to appear in the distance. But it wasn't the warm light they talk about in the peaceful death books. It was cold, almost medical. I moved toward him, not with steps, but with intent. Space reacted to my thought as if I were immersed in a liquid mind. As I got closer, I saw a figure. Man. In white. He wasn't an angel. His clothes were untidy, his hair was disheveled, and his face, it was mine. Yes, he looked like me, but younger. He was smiling. Not maliciously, but calmly. As if he knew I'd be surprised and had prepared for it beforehand. I'm you, he said. The one you wouldn't listen to. I didn't understand. You're dead, James, he continued. But this is just the beginning. He made a gesture, and space split open like cloth cut by invisible scissors. There was something else behind that cut. Movement. Whisper. Light and dark at the same time. It was as if someone had mixed reality with a nightmare. And I fell through. I didn't feel like I was falling, but I knew I was going down. It was getting darker with each passing moment that lasted forever. Whispers became voices. Voices, screams. But the screams were not from pain, but from voids. It was the groan of those who realized that they were not being listened to. Suddenly I was in a place that still had a shape. It was a hall. Huge as an underground cathedral, built not by a man, but by something else. The ceilings were lost in darkness, and the walls were covered with symbols that seemed both familiar and alien. They throbbed. They were breathing. There were figures in the center. People. Or almost people. They repeated the same movements, like a dance. But it wasn't a dance of joy, it was a painful repetition. Every step echoed with despair. I stood among them, but no one was looking at me. I was a spectator. Or, the next participant. And then I saw him. He was standing off to one side. One. The light fell on him in a special way, not from above, but from inside. He was dancing. Slowly, beautifully, almost hypnotically. His movements were perfect, but there was no life in them. They were like a recorded gesture, looped endlessly. His face was in shadow, but I knew it was him. A celebrity. King of the stage. The voice of generations. Michael Jackson. What was he doing here? I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. My voice was getting stuck inside. I started to get closer, and then he looked at me. For the first time in all this time, someone here looked at me. His eyes were unfathomable. And I knew he knew who I was. He was waiting for me. Just then, something inside me cracked. Not out of fear, but out of awareness. I was invited here. All this is not accidental. And the conversation that just started will change everything. I've always considered myself a skeptic. A man hardened by logic and fact. And yet, when I died, it didn't matter in the slightest. They say that when a person dies, they see the light. But in my case, it all started with sound. A dull, heavy thud, as if something huge and ancient had fallen into the bottomless darkness. No pain, no fear, just a misunderstanding. I didn't realize right away that I was dead. Everything seemed distorted, like a dream, familiar sensations distorted, as if the world had switched to a different frequency and I hadn't tuned in yet. My last moment in life was miserable. Sudden heart attack in a shopping mall parking lot. I didn't even have time to grab my chest, I just fell like a doll with its strings cut off. When I woke up, the earth was different. Dense. Throbbing. It was like she was breathing. The darkness was not void, but matter. It enveloped me, pressed down on me, but not physically, it was deeper. It was as if my very consciousness was being held captive. I tried to move, but I had no body. I couldn't tell where I ended and this started, place. And yet, I was moving. Or I was moved. Images flashed on and off before me. They weren't memories, they were symbols. An eye that throbs like a heart. A scale whose bowl was constantly tipped to the left. A tree with skulls instead of fruit. They came up one by one, like paintings in a windowless museum. Where am I? I wanted to ask. But there were no words. Just a thought. Only despair. And then a voice rang out. He had no direction. He was in and out of my head. It sounded like a whisper in the library, and at the same time like the rumble of a cathedral collapsing. Are you ready to see what you've been hiding from yourself all your life? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Everything in me froze. But the voice continued. It's not a punishment. This is a revelation. The darkness began to fade. Or maybe she just backed out. A landscape that could not be described in ordinary words appeared around them. The sky was low and made of lead. The ground was cracked like ancient leather. The air pulsed with sounds that no known instrument ever made. I was standing on the edge of something great and terrible. Is this hell? I thought to myself. But no one answered. Instead, the dive began. Rocks made of ash. Streams that flowed not water, but a gray, viscous substance. And shapes. Oh, those figures. They moved slowly, as if each step was worth an eternity. Some of them were crying, but there were no tears. Some were praying, but their tongues were mute. They weren't just convicts. They were frozen. Each of their movements is like a repeating fragment of the past. They didn't stop me. No one tried to grab him. They didn't seem to notice me. And yet, everything here was connected to me. I felt it in my gut. Mirrors appeared in the landscape. But in each of them there was not my appearance, but scenes from my life. I saw myself lying to a friend when I should have told the truth. How he laughed at the sufferer. How I walked past a homeless man, not because I couldn't help but because I didn't want to see him. And all this came back to me, not as a reproach, but as an indisputable fact. As a diagnosis. You saw it, the voice said again. But he turned away. You knew, but you decided to forget. And now you can't help but remember. I wanted to scream. I wanted to escape. But hell is not a place to run. It is a mirror from which it is impossible to turn away. I felt cold. Not from the temperature. But from awareness. There are no shackles here, because you are your own punishment. No fire burns here. Shame burns here. Here, every thought is like a naked nerve. And in the midst of it all, he appeared. First as a shadow. Then as a silhouette. Dance. Steps. Light. But that will be later. Now I was facing a real horror, the truth about myself. And I knew I was dead. But it didn't disappear. And this is much scarier. I do not know how long I have been falling. In general, it is strange to talk about time in a place where the very concept of yesterday or tomorrow loses its meaning. Everything is compressed in a single instant, in an extended second that simultaneously lasts forever and passes in a single blink. At first it was dark. The real thing is not the absence of light, but a dense, almost liquid substance, as if someone had wrapped me in black velvet, preventing me from breathing. And then I heard it. No, not the voice. Not even sounds. It was a realization. A thought that didn't belong to me, but settled in my head as surely as if it had always lived there. You're not the first. And not the last one. I found myself on a sort of stone bridge suspended in the void. Beneath my feet are gray, weathered slabs stretching away into the distance. There is nothing around. No sky, no earth. Only in the distance, purple smoke swirled like a haze over a volcano. The body wasn't there. But everything felt very vivid. I could feel the hot wind on my skin, and I could hear the grinding sound of someone slowly sharpening a blade on bone. I didn't move. And that's when I first saw them. Shapes. Human, but distorted. They hung in the air on both sides of the bridge, as if on hooks, but without chains. They just hung there. Some were silent. Others whispered something in different languages. French, Latin, and Arabic. I do not know how I understood them. But he understood. You knew. You felt it. But I waved it off, whispered one of them, a woman with twisted eyes. We are the reflections of your doubts, said the other, a male with twisted arms bent back like wings. They didn't threaten. They didn't call out. They just were. Watched. Like judges without a verdict. I took a step forward. The stones groaned under his feet. The bridge seemed to breathe, now widening, now narrowing. Every step I took echoed with pain in those figures. I felt their agony as if it were my own. Then I noticed a light ahead of me. He didn't call, didn't beckon. Rather, it was a flash of awareness, as if your subconscious mind decided to show you the truth in the form of a landscape. So I went to her. The light turned into a gate. Colossal, black, covered with writing in an unfamiliar language. They were ajar. Heat and sounds wafted through the crack. It wasn't a scream. And don't cry. It was music. But the music is not from this world. As if children's toys were trying to play a funeral march. I stepped closer. A phrase was stamped on the gate. In my language. They don't judge here. They show it here. I went in. What I saw is difficult to describe in ordinary terms. The space there was illogical. Gravity is changeable. The floor quivered and bent like cloth, the walls moved like lungs when you inhaled. Colors, they weren't just there, they sounded, smelled, breathed. I found myself in a square where there was no center. People, if they were people, sat in circles, repeating gestures that made no sense. One scratched his skin and stitched it back together. Another was driving nails into his own shadow. I saw a woman feeding a baby, but there was empty air in her hands. And the baby was just a phantom that disappeared every time she tried to hug it. And they continued. Without interruption. Without thinking. It was as if they were doomed to do this forever. This isn't a punishment, I thought again, this is the truth. Only in characters. Symbols of what? I wanted to shout. But the voice inside me continued. You're not you here. You are a reflection of your choices. And each of them is a brick from which your personal hell is built. I started walking again. step by step, through distorted corridors without walls. And every time I passed someone, I felt like I knew them. Not personally, but at the level of meaning. They were sins. Life. Thoughts. And each of them was to some extent a part of me, too. I particularly remember one scene, a middle-aged man sitting in front of a mirror that was alive. It moved, pulsed, and reflected scenes from his past. But every time he tried to turn away, the mirror whispered, "Look." Until the end. He couldn't close his eyes. And I got it, this place doesn't take revenge. It doesn't hit. It shows. Face to face. Without filters. No chance to turn away. And that's when I knew I was in hell. But not in the fiery one, not the one in the pictures. This is the hell of truth. A place where you can't lie to yourself anymore. They stood facing each other, a man of flesh and memory and the shadow of what had once been the most recognizable man on the planet. The air, if you could call it that, vibrated, as if every particle of space was in suspense. Michael Jackson didn't move, but every curve of his body reminded me of a dance, even the silence around him seemed to keep time. "Why are you here?" His eyes were empty, like two frozen puddles that reflect the moon but don't reflect the soul. He didn't answer right away. He just walked around in a circle, almost like a predator circling its prey. Or an artist on stage. He was smiling, and there was something unbearably human about it, and at the same time completely alien. "Do you want to know why I'm in hell?" he said, and his voice was broken. Like an old tape, a little slow, a little shaky, as if not fully recorded. "Haven't you figured it out yet? Hell is not a place, it is a mirror." I shuddered. His words hit me like a hammer. You dance in front of everyone, and one day you forget for whom. And then, for what? Only the dance remains. Infinite. He becomes you. He stood right in front of me and looked me in the eye. I didn't know if I breathed at all in this world, but even if I did, I couldn't get enough air. I'm not here for what everyone thinks. I wasn't hooked on the outside. The external is always just a mask. I wore masks, but hell tore them all off. He showed me who I really am. He does not judge actions, he judges the essence. It reveals the core. I could feel his every word echoing in my bones. He wasn't just talking about himself. He was talking about me. About people. About us. There is no flame in hell. There is a repetition. Loop. You're playing your biggest sin over and over again. And even if you don't know what he was wearing, hell knows. It will show you. Not immediately, but it will show. I whispered, afraid to hear the answer. He looked at me with a longing so deep that I wanted to look away. Lie to yourself. I said that everything is for the sake of children, for the sake of good. But I lived in fear. All I did was run. I ran so far away from myself that I was on stage, in front of millions. And it turned out to be hell even then. I just didn't get it right away. He came closer. I felt the space between us grow heavier, as if time had thickened. "And you, Thomas?" His voice grew sharper, like the squeak of an old record. "Why are you here?" I froze. I wasn't ready. I had come to look for answers, but now I understood. I had come to look into the abyss, and the abyss was looking into me. Me. I didn't believe it. "I didn't believe in anything," I said. He shook his head, like a teacher who is tired of students who have learned their lesson too late. "It's not faith that sends you to hell. Indifference. Cold. You believe that the truth is in the void. And she was in the choice. And you didn't choose. You passed by." I fell to my knees. Tears, or their equivalent in this world, trickled down my cheeks. I could feel something breaking inside me. Like a lifetime's worth of walls crumbling under the weight of words. But if I realized, isn't it too late? Michael leaned in, almost whispering. "Late is an illusion. There's no time here. It's just you and your truth. If you realize, not forever. At that moment, the light around us began to change. It wasn't getting brighter or darker, it was getting deeper. It was as if the fabric of reality was being torn open, revealing a new scene. New action. I realized that our meeting was not an accident. It was an act. Stage. He held out his hand. I expected cold, but I felt hot. His hand was warm. Alive. A real one. And then I realized, even in hell, there can be a moment of truth. Let's go. You should see more, he said. You must dance. I didn't know what he meant. But I got up. I took his hand. There was no flame in hell. But there was a dance. A dance where every step is a memory. Where every movement is a recognition. Where music is your life, played on broken strings. So I followed him. Not as a student. Not as a fan. Like a person who has lost himself and starts looking. It took me a moment to realize where I was. There was a room in front of me. Empty, at first glance. Concrete gray walls. One lamp, dim, hung from the ceiling, swinging like a pendulum, as if the very fabric of time depended on it. No windows. No doors. Not a sound. But most importantly, this room breathed. I do not know how else to put it. It didn't just exist. She was attentive. It was like she was watching me. Not through the cameras, not through the cracks. The room itself was watching. And waited. I stood in the center, even though my legs were shaking. There's a familiar feeling in my chest, not panic, not terror, but something ancient. It's like I've finally remembered something I forgot so many lifetimes ago. And it bothered me. Suddenly a flash. One of the walls began to change. It was as if a shadow had passed over her, but it didn't disappear. Something squeezed out of the plane of the wall, as if it were liquid instead of stone. And out of it came an image. Not a portrait. Not a photo. It was a memory. I saw myself young. I'm sitting in the car, and there's someone crying in the back seat. It was my brother. I remembered that we had quarreled. He asked for help, it was hard for him, he was struggling with addiction. And I turned away then. I said, figure it out for yourself. You're an adult. I was standing in front of this living wall, like a confessional. Only it wasn't God who judged me, it was my past. I could feel the words spoken back then echoing in this place. Not in the ears, but in the heart. I realized that everything has weight here. Every word. Every gesture. Another wall, and again the image. I'm on stage. It was one of my triumphs. Applause, lights, crowd. But now everything looked different. What I saw was not success, but how I hid my emptiness behind it. How I longed for recognition, to stifle my own self-loathing. As each performance was not a holiday, but an escape. Soon all the walls were full. Like the halls in a museum, only the exhibits were me. My choices. My fears. My betrayals. And my silences. And a silhouette appeared in the center of the room. Human. But it wasn't him who struck me, it was the fact that this silhouette spoke in my voice. He repeated all the words I had once said: cruel, self-important, empty. Why did you come here? What is it? He asked me. I started to reply, but the words stuck in my throat. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to say. The silhouette came closer. The face is like mine. But the eyes are empty. And in that emptiness is the truth. I've been avoiding myself all my life. I created masks, roles, and reputations. But never myself. And then he said, God doesn't judge you. You are not judged by society. You are judged only by what you could have been, and didn't become. The words cut through me like needles. I wanted to look away, but the walls were everywhere. I was surrounded by versions of myself. Failed ones. Rejected ones. Forgotten ones. And all I could do was watch. Time is gone. Whether it was a minute or an eternity, it didn't matter. I went through my own trial. Not as a sinner, but as a person who finally saw himself without mirrors. Without makeup. No stage lights. When the figure disappeared, I fell to my knees. I didn't cry. Crying would be easy. I was silent. Because for the first time I realized that pain is not a punishment. It's a mirror. Hell is not a flame. Hell is true. Only now was I ready to move on. I didn't go. I didn't swim. I just happened to be there. After the room of walls, absolute silence. No pain. No images. Not even the rhythm that accompanied me from the very beginning. Everything was gone. Only whiteness. Immense, thick, like a thick veil between worlds. I couldn't feel the body, but I could feel someone close by. Not a person. Not a silhouette. Not a voice. Presence. It was in me, and out of me. It didn't speak, but I understood. You came to hear the truth. Are you ready to hear it, not in images, not in metaphors, but as it is? I didn't answer. The answer was already inside me. You think you were looking for forgiveness. But you were looking for permission not to feel guilty. It's not the same thing. In that moment, I realized that all my life I had confused freedom with escape. Forgiveness with oblivion. I wanted someone to free me. And the truth was that only I could free myself, only after I accepted everything, even the things I hated about myself. The whiteness deepened like fog before a thunderstorm. And then he appeared. It wasn't a man. Not an angel. Not a judge. But I knew it was him. His gaze is not an eye, but an eternity. He wasn't looking at my face, but at my soul, through and through. He saw me as I had never dared to see myself. And there's no judgment in his eyes. Only knowledge. Quiet, eternal. Do you want to know why people end up here? Why do even those who believed, loved, and suffered still fall? I nodded. Because there is only one sin from which neither faith, nor kindness, nor sincerity can save you. And this sin is not murder. Not a lie. Not a betrayal. He took a step closer. And the silence deepened. This is indifference. People don't burn here for mistakes. They burn for not stopping evil. That they averted their eyes. That they passed by. That you didn't feel it when someone needed you. Hell is not for criminals. Hell is for the cold. The words hit me like a bolt of lightning. I thought of my mother crying at night, and I pretended not to hear her. I remembered the old man on the street I hadn't approached. I remembered myself in 100 moments when I could have hugged, protected, intervened, and I didn't. Not because he couldn't. Because I didn't want to feel it. 1,000 souls fall into hell every hour. Not for your sins. And for the ice in the heart. For your silence. For your indifference. I couldn't look at him. It's too bright. It hurts too much. Still, there was truth in the pain. And in the truth, the beginning of healing. He held out his hand. She was neither light nor body. She was a memory of everything I could have ever done better. You can't change the past. But you can tell them. To everyone. While you're here. And then I was thrown out. It was like falling through a million glass doors. The world exploded like air in my lungs, and I screamed. I woke up in the hospital. My heart stopped for 12 minutes. The doctors called it a miracle. I'm not. It wasn't a miracle. It was a mission. I didn't become a prophet. I didn't become a saint. But I was a witness. And now I'm telling you, spectator. If you think that everything is still ahead, look around. If you think that someone else's pain is not your problem, remember who was silent when it hurt you. And if you believe that hell is a flame, know this, it's ice. And he's inside us. If this story made you think, please subscribe. Not for the sake of numbers. For the sake of other stories that are waiting for you. For the sake of questions that no one will give an easy answer to. For the sake of those who are also looking for light in the dark. Subscribe. Because maybe you'll be the voice for someone else. Before it's too late.